everyone, this is Mark.
And this is Megan from our kitchen table.
And you're listening to the Maintain the Threefold podcast, the show that seeks to build up biblical marriages that are firmly knotted to God.
And to each other for the glory of God and His kingdom.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello.
It's good to be back with you guys, and we are excited to record this episode on Dominion.
Yes, I get excited talking about Dominion.
Yeah, so Megan might talk more than me, honestly. She, I don't know, we kind of even out on some episodes, or maybe I talk more, but Megan might talk more on this episode. I don't know.
We'll see. See.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it, but...
There is, and we won't be able to cover everything.
Yeah.
It's as you'll hear and see with us, it is a big topic, and it's one that you need to be very diligent and careful about, as we'll talk about. But just to give you a little background into our week, it's been a great week. We had Fall Fest.
Yes.
And I got to be there, and Megan got to stay home because she was sick with our children.
Yeah.
And so I did not win the chili competition. She did not win the pie contest. But you know what? We got to see people that we really care about win, and that is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So maybe next year we'll win.
We'll see. We'll see.
I change my chili recipe every year. So, the years I did win some awards, I just can't expect it to win every time.
And I hadn't made a homemade crust in a long time, and I did a homemade one this time.
A
sourdough homemade crust, and it's not that I don't like the recipe, it's just I'm not used to it yet, and so I haven't perfected it.
Yeah, it needs a little work, but I still ate it. It was still a pie, so it was very good.
Just not my best pie, but
not the best
that's
pie.
Okay.
That's all right.
Okay.
We'll work on it.
Yeah.
Just like my chili. But no, we've had a great weekend, and we're blessed to be able to be here with you today to talk about Dominion. We've been going through this series kind of talking about the foundations of marriage, and today we're talking about this topic of Dominion. You might be like, well, I've never really talked about that in any shape, form, or fashion.
I feel like it's a relatively new concept for me too,
yeah.
But I'm on fire about it.
Yeah, you're excited about it.
Yeah.
And just to kind of bring you up to speed, if you haven't been with us, we're citing a passage and other passages as well, but specifically out of Genesis. That's where we're addressing a lot of the issues we're talking about in Foundations is right out of the book of Genesis, because it is the beginning, and that's where we wanted to start.
Yeah, I mean, that's where marriage started.
Yeah.
Is in Genesis. So
why not?
God created it, and it has a lot to say about it, and so it's a good place to start. And
it's a great source of application for our marriages. So the passage we're looking at today is Genesis 1:26 through 28. You could honestly read the whole chapter. I'd encourage you to, but I'm just going to read for us 26 through 28, and that'll be kind of the backdrop to what we're discussing today. So in verse 26, this is what it says. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" Again, that word dominion is used quite a bit.
It is. A few times in there.
Yeah, especially concerning our role. We talked about multiply and fill the earth 2 episodes ago, but depending on how you're watching this, it might have been last episode. So this goes to the second part of the command of subdue it, have dominion over it, right? And what's pretty interesting about this command is, like Megan said, it's not really touched on a whole lot.
No, it's not. I mean,
And
nobody talks about it.
No, and I think it's because people are afraid to go out and say, yeah, we've been given dominion over the earth.
It is a bold statement in some respects, for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the bigger reason why people avoid it is there's a hefty weight to this topic, right? And when we look at this recorded blessing that God's given to the human race, right, it's part of the description of the image of God, like how we were made and what we were made to do.
Yeah.
So when we're discussing this, right, this is an expansion of what it means to be made in the image of God. It means to be a person that subdues the earth, that has dominion over the earth. That's what it means to be made in God's image, right?
Right. I mean, and when you think about it, like, God has dominion over everything. Like, he has ultimate control over everything.
He's sovereign over all.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but to a certain degree and extent, like, he has given us dominion.
Yeah, he's given us authority over these things.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not as all-encompassing as his role of dominion is as God, like, but it is still a big role.
It is.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in verse 28, we see it says every living thing, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't just exclude, like it said the fish of the sea and all the birds, and people are like, oh, yeah, that's why we can fish. That's why we have birds. It also includes every living thing.
And when you think about it, basically everything that we have came from a living thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Everything came from, like, even if it's not currently living, like, it came from something that lived.
Yeah.
Like, whether it is, like, leather came from animals, and, like,
cotton came from plants.
Exactly.
Megan's
there
like, yeah, there you go.
You're giving me good examples.
That's a good example.
Blank, so.
No, it's okay. But I think it's pretty interesting, and you pointed this out and kind of teased at it, but the ruler of the universe, our sovereign Lord, thought it was fitting to have men and women be caretakers over creation. Mm-hmm. And that's how we see what it means to be a part of the image, or what it means to be the image of God, right? To share in his attributes, such as lordship, and we get to reflect his character in creating things, like bearing offspring, like that's part of the image of God, right? But also being Lord over other things.
Yeah.
We have rulership over these things. So anyone that tells you that we're equal to monkeys is an idiot. I'm sorry to say. Yeah. But well, actually, I'm not sorry to say. They're foolish. And so to even try to put some equivalence of any part of creation towards humanity is just silly. It's silliness. We have been given lordship over these things, and that's a pretty big deal.
It is. It is. And I mean, I think you can take that a lot of different ways. I think you could take it as a giant responsibility, which, I mean, it is, but at the same time, like, it's also a privilege.
Yeah, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be this heavy weight, and we don't want you guys to walk away with this weight on your shoulders.
I don't think they will.
Yeah.
You start talking about this
once
and
we're done. And hopefully, you walk away with this idea that, yes, I've been given a blessing here. Now I need to go and subdue the earth and take over and all these things. And I think it needs to also be said, when we say take over, we have to remember that our ability to mirror God's perfect state and his perfect lordship and his perfect authority and sovereign control, our ability has been severely compromised because of the fall and of sin, right?
Right.
As we look around, men and women still try to exercise dominion, but they do so to a very, very severe fault, right? Right.
I mean, I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I mean, it's not this, like, I don't know. Like, I guess your attitude towards it is what is really important. Like, it's not this like, oh, like I'm so high and mighty and I'm just gonna like be a bully and take everything under my control. Like, no, like, but it's like, okay, God has given me the people, the home, the things that I have, the sphere of influence that I have, and I'm going to go out and make the most of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to take control, not in a, like, I don't know, not in a, like...
tyrannical way?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for, for the verbiage. My words are not working tonight. But anyway, yeah, not in a tyrannical way, but in a, like, I'm going to be faithful with what God has given me, and I'm going to go out and subdue the earth. Like, take control of it and take care of it and make the most of what I have. Yeah,
and the drive is a God-given drive to have dominion. So when you have people, men and women, that have a desire and a drive in them to go and establish control for God's kingdom, that is a good God-given thing. But as Megan has said, when there are instances when men and women have perverted that intent from a reign of what's supposed to be servant leadership, what's supposed to be I'm going to give this back to my Lord someday and I need to take care of it. I'm Lord over it now, but it's ultimately his, to it's mine. I'm going to do with it what I want, and it's going to be for my glory, my profit, my honor. That is the perversion we're talking about. And we see that inside of Christian communities, or quote unquote Christian communities. I've seen some televangelists actually talk about dominion before in a way where they say, oh, God's given you money and to bless you with more money, and it's all about you, and it needs to be about your riches and your glory. And it has no tie to Jesus and his kingdom. It makes it all about the works of men, and it's honestly a severe perversion of what dominion is supposed to be.
Yeah. I love what you said there about the servant leadership. Like, that's a great way to look at it. Like, it's like, you're leading by serving, and serving by leading. Like, it's a really cool concept.
Well, and if you take the example just with the husband-wife relationship, right? Men have been given authority and leadership over their wives, right? That's a biblical model that we have. But there are men that pervert that, that oppress women, that treat them as lesser and they just destroy the dominion they've been given. But there's also women that rebel against male leadership. Yeah. And they destroy the dominion they've been given, right? And both sides pervert this blessing of dominion, and we need to make sure that we get it right.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think it's a really cool thing when you get it right.
Yeah. I mean, and even expanding on this, we look at nations, right? Nations war against nations instead of working together to multiply, to share resources. I'm looking at what could be potentially World War III happening all over the news, right? And I'm like, if these nations just simply worked together, things would, I would hope, work out. But passages like we've just read in Genesis 1, 26 to 28, there are people that take those scriptures and twist them to justify abuse of the environment. And this is not what it should be. We are to reflect God's holiness. We are to subdue the earth for his glory and for his namesake. A quote that I love from R.C. Sproul, right? It's in his book, The Essential Truths of the Christian Faith. He says, we are called to reflect the character of God's righteous rule over the universe. He never ravages or exploits what he rules, but rather reigns in justice and kindness. That is what we're trying to model for people, right?
Yeah, I really like that quote too. Like, I think it really kind of opens your eyes to the concept, like, especially like when this isn't talked about, kind of like we said, like it kind of opens your eyes to, like, okay, like, this is what dominion means and what it should look like. And
as image bearers, we're supposed to model that and manifest that God's righteous rule. Our goal is to manifest his righteous rule over all creation, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about the subject of dominion, yes, it is our responsibility. Yes, this is a God-given goal. Yes, it's something exciting, but we need to make sure that the focus is, I'm trying to make much of his name, his kingdom over all creation.
Yeah.
Right.
We got to make sure our heart is in the right place and that we're not taking dominion for our own glory, but for his.
Or our own advantages, right? Yeah. Like if you're taking dominion for just your name's sake, then it's going to be just for you. You're going to get what you wish for, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it has to all ultimately be rooted in, like, I want to glorify God.
Yep. And tying back to when we were speaking about be fruitful and multiply, it is closely tied to that. That's why we're talking about these two things together. When you talk about taking dominion and showing God's righteous rule over all creation, that means you need to be fruitful and multiply to establish it over all creation. We even see that reflected now as those that are lost are continuing to fight to kill their children, fight to remove their children off the face of the planet, and those that are God's image bearers are fighting to produce more. Mm-hmm. So if they continue to follow this line, they will just, bring forth God's plan and God's righteous rule over creation.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about that. It's an important topic for today. And this responsibility was not removed from us because of Adam's sin. It really was not. Some people think that, well, Adam sinned and now we don't need to be fruitful and multiply. Now we don't need to go and take dominion for his name's sake, right? We don't have to do that, but it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know about you. Why that work would stop.
Yeah, I don't know why either. I mean, it's because it hasn't stopped. It still is a thing. It's just a thing that hasn't been, I don't think it's been talked about enough, at least not in recent history. And so I think Christians don't. Or at least within certain circles. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I have not even really heard much of the concept at all until, probably in the last year or two. And that's been when I've really, I've gotten really excited about it because it has, brought new, it's helped me see things through a different lens and brought new meaning to life. Yeah. In a way. Well, and I just remember growing up, the number one thing you didn't want to have happen was end up with kids when you were, just getting out of high school or something. Like, I think the idea of having children multiplying, filling the earth was so tarnished. Even when I was going through school, I went through the public education system. So, and so did Megan. But the idea of having fruitful families, the idea of exercising dominion for God's kingdom was not something that was really talked about, at least not within my circles and your circles, right? No. And we know that there are faithful, faithful people out there that are teaching this and preaching this good news to other faithful Christians. But for us, I never heard it. Yeah. I didn't either. Yeah. So. Yeah. And, that's why we fight for the lives of children in the womb. That's why we do these things. These are image bearers of God who can fulfill this mandate, who can fulfill the call to be fruitful, multiply, have dominion. And that's what the work of the Great Commission is about. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. But we also want to kind of break down what dominion is and subduing God's creation for God's glory, right? Because we want to give you some practical applications for that, but it is a multifaceted endeavor. It is a multifaceted work. Yes, for sure. But stick with us. Because if you can just get a glimpse of this, in what it can look like, I feel like it can be really powerful and inspiring and just a really cool thing that God has given us.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to like really hit on two facets of this endeavor. We don't want to take a ton of your time. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate all of you that listen with us. So we want to hit on two main ones in ways that we can subdue creation, just practically as husbands and wives, as mothers, fathers. The first way, and it ties back to our episode previous to this, right? It involves raising godly children and the conversion of nations so that the world will be filled with sanctified image bearers, right? Mm-hmm. And that's part of the command to go and be fruitful and multiply. But we have been given the mandate to bear offspring, godly offspring.
Yeah. And kind of like you were saying before, and, about how the world is fighting to kill their children.
At least America. Well, America, China, yeah.
Yeah, with abortion being such a front issue right now. Mm-hmm. And even beside that, there's people worried about, the population control and about like running out of resources and all of this stuff. And so like they're having fewer children.
When there needs to be more.
Yeah. And, I mean, God will provide, and I think we touched on that in another episode. Like, God will provide, and He will provide people that figure out how to make the resources stretch and work to provide for all the people that are on earth. Like, I don't think that's something that we need to be worried about if you're a Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the world can worry because they don't understand and they don't see things through our lens. But like just the exponential growth, like if you are a Christian family who is faithfully following the Lord and you have lots of kids and you are teaching them to faithfully follow the world so that they will have lots of kids that they teach to faithfully follow the Lord. I don't know if I said world there once, I don't know. But anyway, if you're teaching generation after generation to follow the Lord and you are multiplying, like it's exponential growth. Like you're over time, like if you are faithful in that job and teach your kids to be faithful in that job and that continues, like
you will convert the nations.
Yes. Well, and
the Lord will ultimately.
And we're reading Numbers now in our Bible reading. And
yeah, we're in the book of Numbers.
I will admit, Numbers is not my favorite thing to read just because it feels very, like,
numerical.
Repetitive. Yeah. I mean, I like numbers, but, like the concept of numbers, I'm a math person. But, and it's not like that I just dislike the book. It's the Bible, so. But it's just, sometimes it's hard for me to read because it just seems like a bunch of names and a bunch of numbers, and I, don't always grasp all the details. But when you think about it, and they're going through, I was reading through, and they're talking about how many people are in the different tribes and families and stuff, and you're talking about 50,000, 100,000, these
thousands
giant
of people
numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm those grew over time in generations.
Yep.
But I'm if you are faithfully following the Lord and your family continues to do that, in the future, you're going to have this giant, mass of descendants that follow God. And that's a really cool thing to think about.
And God has entrusted those to you, Yeah. That's why the topic of dominion comes here, is because you've been given, the call to go and be fruitful, but it's also a place where you can go and have lordship and authority. You're supposed to raise godly children. Well, how do you do that? You take dominion. You say, okay, we've got to read through God's word. We got to catechize our kids. We got to make sure that we're teaching them the hymns and getting as much about Christ into our family as we can. And not to say that we have that nailed down perfectly, right?
No, definitely not.
But you need
working
to,
on it.
as husband and wife together, be like, yeah, this is our dominion. These children are generations beyond us. Even if you're grandparents, right? They're still offspring of your offspring, and you have a responsibility to be involved in their lives and to, if you can, really.
Yeah.
I know some situations you may be expelled from their lives, but try to fight for your grandchildren's salvation so that their children, your great-grandchildren and great-grandchildren, think generations beyond you,
Yeah.
not just the immediate.
Exactly. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss. And I think, like, just especially in this day and age, like, we're in such an individualistic culture, and people are thinking about, like, their own life. And, like, yes, they're going to take care of their kids, but I feel like it's more like okay, I'm going to raise my kids, and so they'll be, like, productive citizens when they're adults, and I'll, of course, love them and be there for them, but it's like they're a separate entity, like, once they're out of your house or something, like, that. Like,
I don't have to care about them anymore once they're out of the house.
I mean, not like that, but like.
Well, that's sometimes the case.
We have lost the, like, impact of generations.
Yeah.
Like, and that theme is all through the Bible, and
it is.
It talks about it a lot, about, like, providing for your children's children, and, like family lines, and all of that is, like, very important.
It is.
We have lost a lot of those concepts over the years.
Yeah, and I think just in talking and having conversations with you in the past, you were very close to your grandparents, right? And they had generational impact on you.
Yeah.
Whereas I loved my grandparents, and if my grandmother listens, I love you, but I don't always I don't always feel the closeness that you talk about that you had. I don't think they had the impact that they probably wish they would have had on my life. Now, not to say they had zero impact, because they did. They had impact on my life, but personally, I would have loved to see more and have more, right? Mm-hmm. And so for you as husbands, wives, grandparents, as you're thinking down the line generationally, and even right now, be considering what's ahead. How are you going to be exercising dominion, multiplying, and bearing fruit in your family and outside of your family?
Yeah. I think it's helpful. It's definitely helpful to think long term and think, about the future generations. But it's also important to remember that, like, that starts now. That, like, you have to be faithful now in order to get there down the line. But
yeah, absolutely. Let's go to number 2, the second part of our multifaceted endeavor, right? Subduing creation for God's glory. The first part was involving raising godly children, conversion of the nations, filling the world with image bearers of God, right? And then the second one is taking dominion as we endeavor to use our talents in every discipline in order to bring God glory, right? So specifically, as you are at work or in your vocation, the goal is to seek to glorify God in everything you do, by all of your laboring, which is diligent. My hope is that it is diligent. It's also in submission to your leadership or your bosses or the authority over you. So that's kind of the second part, is where you're using your talents in every aspect of your life to bring glory and honor to God.
Yeah.
Okay. Practically to the husbands, I'll just speak real quick, right? That means, where God has equipped you and given you a passion, right? Whether it's woodworking, janitoring, maybe it's lawn mowing, maybe it is preaching, maybe it's something else. I don't know what it is, but God has given you a talent and a discipline to bring him glory and honor. Mm-hmm. Use it to do so. If your vocation is where you are passionate, do it to the full ability that you can and glorify our Heavenly Father with it, right? Work hard. It is your dominion that he's given to you. It may be a dominion that's under the authority of someone else, like you may be serving someone else, but that's the dominion he's given you. He's wanting you to submit to the authority over you right now. And that's not always fun for us men, but that's what you've been placed in right now, okay? Mm-hmm. So, men, work hard at this. This is not something to take lightly because God has given you this to bring him increased glory and honor. I think of the parable of the talents. God has given you this. What are you returning? What are you bringing back? Are you hiding away your work? Are you bringing him back fivefold, tenfold? Like what are you doing with it?
Even like what are you doing with your resources? Like
exactly
your finances, and
how are you using and stewarding the resources that you're getting from that work? Mm-hmm. Right? Are you spending it on video games all the time? All right, I'm going to pick on some of my video game friends. Are you spending it on just fruits for your namesake, or are you spending it on things to exercise and expand your dominion?
Yeah.
Right. Those are some things to consider, men. But then Megan might have something for our ladies that might ruffle some feathers. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it might, but it's important and it needs to be said, and it's exciting too. So I think practically as a wife, one of our ways of exercising dominion is by helping our husbands.
Yep.
Because essentially when we married our husband, we agreed to go on mission with him, even though we may not have understood it in those words at that time. God has placed him where he's put him, and you are by his side.
Yep.
I am by Mark's side, and so it is my job to be faithful in helping you in where God has put you. And
correct.
You being in ministry, it's my job to help you and support you in whatever way I can. And of course, every situation and every circumstance, that's going to look different, depending on what your husband does and where his passions are.
And that's the roles that have been established for us in the Genesis account.
Yeah.
And when we get outside of that, we're basically forfeiting dominion.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's tied a lot with submission, which I know nobody likes to talk about, but it's also, it really is a beautiful thing when it's done right. Leadership from a husband and submission from a wife. Even though it gets bad light. When it's done right, it's really great, and it just works perfectly.
Yeah.
They complement each other really.
They do. And you talked about being on his mission, on the husband's mission, yeah. Right? So to tie into that, husbands have a mission. If you don't have a mission, she can't be on mission with you. She can't help you. If you don't have a goal, how can she help you in that?
Yeah, yeah. I was just listening to a podcast about this yesterday. Bright Hearth, it's a great podcast. If you've never heard of it, I highly recommend it. But they were just talking about having a mission, as a family, as husband and wife. What are you here for? What are you going to do? Specifically, of course, we're here to glorify God, and we're here to do all these things we've been talking about, being fruitful and multiplying and having dominion. But what specifically does that look like for you?
Yeah.
In your home and in your family. And so what we do as wives should be helping and complementary to what our husband is doing and is called to, yeah. And that mission that he's on. And so if what we're doing is detracting from his mission and where God has placed him, then we should probably be thinking about that.
Yeah, we should weigh that out carefully.
Weigh that out, yeah, yeah.
I was actually asking a young man the other day. He was talking about a nice young lady, and he's thinking ahead. And I said, well, is she going to be one that's willing to follow you, to be on mission with you? And he said, I don't know. I was like, that's a good question to get answered before you start getting into this boat. Not to say that we have all the right answers, but, ladies, considering those things before marriage is a really, really good start. If you don't want to follow them, you probably shouldn't marry.
Well, yeah, and I just heard, I want to say it was on a YouTube video the other day. I want to say it was Doug Wilson that was talking about it, but he was saying that, like, as a woman, like, you get to choose who you marry. So, like, if you're not willing to submit to him, then you probably shouldn't marry him.
Yeah.
So like,
we don't have forced marriages here.
Exactly. So, like, this submission is not this horrible, awful, like, I'm lesser than thing. Like, no, like, it is you coming alongside someone that you care about, that you love, that you believe in the mission that God has given him, and you want to help him in it.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And I think that concept has gotten lost in, like, I feel like it's like, well, let me find someone who loves God and I like them and and then let's just hit it off.
Let's just hit it off, yeah.
Like, and it's like, it's
there's
so
a little more
much
to
more
it,
than
yeah.
that has got lost in translation over time.
Yeah, and to be, crystal clear, when we got married, we probably didn't consider all these things.
Oh, no.
But
is a journey for
God has worked it out. And, what's funny is, like, you might be thinking, well, what kind of missions are we talking about here? Well, part of our mission just in our family is to minister to the church where we're at, and that's simply because of my calling as a pastor, but doing this podcast is a part of our mission because we want to minister to wives, to husbands, to families. We want to help equip and glorify God in the home, and we want to see other homes be reckoned to him.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really exciting for us to see happen. And so this is part of the mission work that Megan's come alongside of me and helped me with, and it's an exciting thing to do and be a part of. But that's what the mission side of it. And then I think we've got, like, our homes to talk about too.
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, I get fired up about this one. So God has given women a special role, I feel like, of dominion over the home. Not that like he gave men the role of, like, provider and protector. Like, you're, like, men
leading and shepherding.
Yeah, leading and shepherding, going out, providing for their family, protecting their family, like, taking care of their needs, leading the way.
Yep.
All of that. Yeah. And as women, as wives, like, we have this role of, like, management over our homes. Yeah. And it talks about that in Titus 2 and various other places too. Proverbs 31. There's a few different places.
Titus 2 would be a great place.
Yes.
To go.
Yes. So anyway, like, we have this role of management over our homes, and that authority in our home doesn't take away from our submission to our husband. Like, he still oversees that. Like, it's not like the home is my domain and I'm just gonna rule over it and you have no say here.
Yeah,
like,
you don't get to say nothing.
That is not what that means. But it's more like,
I've seen some women do that though.
Yeah. And it's usually not pretty. But
I've also seen the exercising of happy wife, happy life kind of philosophy, and that is also not a biblical stance.
Yeah,
not to say you should make your wives unhappy, men, not to go out of your way, but yeah.
Yeah.
Her submitting in authority to her husband in the home is not taking away her dominion or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's more so like, as my husband's helper, like, God has given wives the home as the place to care for and manage. And I know some people may not like this, and, like, I know in, like, mainstream culture right now, it's all about, like, division of labor and like
division of bank accounts.
Yeah, like, husband and wife should both be doing, like, everything in the home, and like, splitting those duties. And I'm not saying that a woman has to do every single thing at home and a man can never do that. But I feel like the main management of the home has been a role that has been given to women. And I don't want that to sound like a downer thing. Like, let me break this down. So basically, like, it is our role to have dominion over our homes. And that is not supposed to be this, like, oh gosh, I have to do the laundry and I have to do the dishes. And no, like, take dominion over your home. Like, if you don't like the way it looks, then change it.
Yep.
If it is not an environment that brings, like, peace and comfort and, like, unity to your family, then fix those things that are preventing that.
Get to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Change it up, and men supply the ability for them to change it up.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, so, like, we're in the process of changing some stuff up in our house. We painted our walls. We're about to paint kitchen cabinets here soon.
A lovely green color.
Yes, because it needs it.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Like, and I want to make my home an environment that, like, my family enjoys being at, that we, like, enjoy looking at. And I mean, like, beautifying it, I think that's a big aspect of it. And I know that may seem like, I don't know, shallow or superficial in some aspects. Like, but
I don't think so, because, I mean, do you really want your house to be a place where people want to escape from?
Exactly. Like, you want it to be a place where your family wants to be. And when you think about God, like, he made this beautiful earth and creation. Like, he made that. Like, God cares about beauty. Like, it is not a superficial thing. I mean, like, yes, there are things that are more important than, like, painting your cabinets. I get that. I'm not saying that there's not, but I'm saying, like, it is a big calling and a beautiful responsibility to, like, make your house a beautiful place that your family enjoys being, and a place where you can be productive and be faithful to what God's called you. And, like, taking dominion over your home can also be planting a garden, pulling the weeds, like, taking care of the land that you have, like, using it to be fruitful by growing things to provide for your family, or to provide income for your family. Yeah.
And this will look different for every wife, every husband. I mean, when you talk about exercising dominion over the home, you know, some women may be listening saying, I'm not a gardener and have no passion or desire to ever garden. That's okay. It's your family. It's your management, right? It's your home, and you and your husband need to talk through those things.
Yeah, I'm not trying to tell you how to do it. I'm just trying to rattle off examples. And, like, each of us, each of our families, each of all our marriages, we're in different seasons, we're in different locations, we have different missions. And so, like you said, that's going to look different. But there's just so much to it, like, so much realm and vastness that, like, we can choose from, of, like, what can I do to my home, in my home, around my home, to, like, better my family. Like, what does my family need? Like, you know, maybe, like, maybe you need to watch out for your family's health, and you need to figure out, like,
you need to clean out the fridge.
Maybe you need to clean out the fridge. Yeah, I mean, that's an act of dominion.
It is.
Let me take out this food that is gross.
Yeah, that is poisoning my family.
Like, let me rearrange my fridge so that there's room for the groceries that I need to buy. Like, let me fill my pantry when I go to the grocery store, and be faithful in, like, planning our meals and planning for the future. Like, let me make sure that I am providing for, like, all of the random things that my family needs that pop up. Like, yeah.
And again, tying all this back to the roles that God has established in submission to your husband, wives, husband, not in a tyrannical rule, in a rule that is a servant leadership and a good leading of the household, right? And trusting your spouse, your wife, to manage it well, right? So provide her the resources to be able to do it. If She needs to paint the cabinets green to better your home, to make it feel more welcoming, to where you don't want to escape it. Then provide those things to her. And you may be asking, how do I do that? Go and take dominion. Yeah. Go and work. Go and labor. Shepherd and lead, right? That's why God has given us these roles. And this is where we flourish, right? This is how we are faithful stewards. And if we're not doing those things, we're giving up dominion to someone else or something else, right? Yeah. Or giving the dominion that men have to women or women have to men.
And it gets messy when you do that.
It does. You get outside of the design that God has established for us.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's easy to fall into those patterns. Just like it says in Genesis 3, verse 16, the second half of the verse, it says, your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. So I feel like as wives, sometimes we want to take over too much control. Yeah. And when we do that, I think sometimes husbands can just give it to us because they don't want to.
They don't want to fight.
Yeah, they don't want to fight. And so then you've got some role reversal going on there, but it gets messy. And
it does. Because women want you to fight, men. They say they want you to give it up, and then you're like, okay, but they want you to fight for what's actually yours. And take what's yours that has been given to you by God. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode. We're actually going to have 2 episodes consecutive here coming about shepherding and lordship for our men, and then help and glory for our women. So we encourage you to come back for those episodes. Those will be fun.
Yeah.
When we kind of unpack these roles a little bit more.
And I'm sure we'll touch on more of this in those specific contexts a little bit too. But
yeah. But again, when we're talking about dominion, just to kind of wrap up some stuff with you and give you some final thoughts, right? God has given you this dominion. It is yours to be a faithful steward of. It is not meant to be for your glory, for your honor, or for your name. It's for Him and His kingdom, right?
Yeah, it's about being faithful where God has planted you and fulfilling the role that He has given you and doing it all for His glory. And I think if we go at it grasping for ourselves, it's not going to be pretty. But if you go at it I'm going to do this for the Lord and for His glory, you're going to get more out of it than if you're grasping for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, we appreciate you all joining with us tonight. We hope that you will join us for our next episode. As always, our hope and prayer is that you will join in our aim to firmly tie our marriages in threefold measure.
Knotted firmly to Christ and each other for the glory of God and for His kingdom.
If you like what you heard and want to hear future episodes, drop a like, a subscribe, a review, give us a comment. Haven't seen any comments yet, so either people are afraid to give us their opinions or they're afraid they're going to hurt our feelings. You're not going to hurt my feelings, I promise. I've had a lot of negative reviews in my life, but we encourage you to just do those things. Even share an episode with someone that you might think get a lot out of it. That'd be great. Join us next time as we're going to be leading off with the men. As we kind of just talked about, we're going to be talking about the topic of leading and shepherding. So it's going to be specifically addressing the men, but as we kind of touched on a little bit, this will still be applicable for the ladies because men and women tend to struggle with giving up dominion and taking dominion of the other person's roles. So we encourage you to listen to both of these episodes together as husband and wife. So don't be like, oh, this is the men episode. You don't need to listen, honey.
Yeah. I mean, wives need to understand what their husband's role is so they can make sure that they're not taking that over and so that they can encourage him in that role.
Right. And we'll be talking about that in the next couple episodes. So We'll see you then, right?
Yes. Until then, cling to Christ as we tie together in threefold measure.
Bye, everybody.
See you.